I finally get to see Trainspotting 2 on Saturday. So not only am I happy, I'm sure my friends are very happy too. If you're Facebook friends with me and you've been Facebook friends with me for like the last year, I'm so sorry. But finally, your suffering comes to an end, and more importantly, my suffering comes to an end. Trainspotting 2 has been like a fucking cock tease for the last several months. It was supposed to come out in January, and I think in some places it did come out in January, and then it was supposed to have like a wide release in March, I believe, and it kind of had a wide release, but not really, not wide enough, because it hasn't opened here until like mid-April, which is I think it'll be April 16th, Saturday, when I get to go see it. And so every sort of bit of information that I had about a release for this movie has gotten me excited until I realized it was opening on like a fucking island somewhere in the middle of the ocean, but not Savannah, Georgia. I don't even know why I like this series as much as I do. I don't connect to it per se. I mean, I guess there is some sort of connection with Mark Renton. He has a sort of journey of self that he goes on after stealing a bunch of money, but he still has that, and I feel like that's sort of part of living. I guess people go on it, at different ages and different stages of their life, but, you eventually have to go on that journey of self-discovery or succumb to societal standards in some way, which I guess is what Mark ended up doing at the end of Trainspotting. So yeah, I've felt myself do that for the last couple of years in order to make a living, in order to survive. Or you get to a point in your life where you actually don't mind doing those things that society wants you to do. But, I guess you should only do them when you're good and goddamn ready, or when you stole a bunch of money. I don't actually know the point of Trainspotting at all. I'm pulling stuff out of my ass, but I'm sure there will be a bunch of comments telling me about how wrong I am. I'm really frustrated with sort of the cat and mouse game that I've had to play with this fucking movie, and how the weeks of disappointment of opening Fandango and realizing that, again, it was not going to open anywhere near me. I got really excited when it opened in Atlanta, because for a moment I thought maybe, they would continue the pattern of opening up in Georgia theaters, and that did not happen. I would love to say that I haven't been watching any sort of trailers or any sort of content, but that's a complete fucking lie. I've been consuming everything T2 related. That's Trainspotting 2. Please don't make any Terminator 2 jokes. I've been watching clips, been looking at pictures, I've been stalking the Twitter, I've been hanging out on the Facebook page, been reading articles, the big interview with Graham Norton that they did a couple of months ago, I've watched that way too many times to count. I've been so desperate for some sort of information about this fucking movie, and if it's not the best movie I've ever seen, I think I'm going to just explode or implode or do something that involves me ploding. But I doubt I'll have enough sense to actually judge the movie fairly, just because of how much I've already built it up, the reviews on it, and how much I love this movie. I guess I'll make another video on Saturday, or maybe Sunday, since I'm going kind of late to see it, and I'll give a review, a completely biased bullshit review that's gonna love whatever I see. That movie could literally just be the camera focused on like 3 fucking syringes for an hour and a half, and I'd call that shit art. It'd be my movie of the year, and I'd be angry when it wasn't nominated for the Oscars and whatnot. Hope it's good. Not that it matters, but I hope it's good anyway. I'm actually here in the theater by myself to see Trainspotting 2. I don't know if more people are going to come in, but it's about 10 minutes until showtime and no one's here yet. Maybe we got the late people. I don't know. But this is kind of the best way.
We're hitting the streets of Austin to check out South by Southwest with Jessica Chobot and getting the latest trends in tech from Dell. Front and center on tech starts now.
So, yeah. Yay! A few more people actually did end up coming into the theater. I was a little disappointed. I was hoping I could see the movie by myself. That would have been really cool. But it was kind of nice to have other people in there too. There was, I think, 4 other people ended up coming in, and it was kind of nice because we were all laughing at the same parts. We were all kind of gasping at the same parts and getting silent on the same parts. So it was nice to have an experience with other people, but not, I guess, too many other people. I want to preface this review by saying I don't do film reviews. I normally, when I see a movie in theaters, I don't analyze and dissect them then and there. I try and go in to just enjoy them for what they are, kind of turn off my brain and just accept it as it comes to me. But if I do end up analyzing and dissecting a movie in a theater, one of 2 things has happened. The movie is so amazing that I've taken it upon myself to try and break down the elements of this movie and decipher the formula that went into making this feat in cinema, or it's so bad that I'm attempting to examine each element in utter disbelief that something so horrendous could actually be committed to film. I'm just gonna have to channel my fucking inner Jeremy Johns and get this shit done. So here we go. Trainspotting 2. So that's how Jeremy does it, right? I think the most important thing that's happening in Trainspotting 2 throughout the entire film is that everyone, with maybe the exception of Spud, is trying to remain in that part of their life that they feel they were the best in, the most invincible in, the most having the most fun in. You start to notice that no one has moved forward. But I think they all crave some sort of motion to feel like there is progression, but it's not forward. They've sort of started going backwards just to, I guess, to feel like they're actually, kinetic in some way. They're all craving the glory moments of their life where they could be as destructive and dumb and deceitful as they wanted to and not really suffer any consequences, because the real consequences of these guys' actions happen off screen or after the major events of Trainspotting. The first hour is a little slow, and that is a complete service to the people who came into this without seeing the first movie. But it never feels boring. You never don't feel engaged. You don't feel like they're taking up too much time. It is to sort of catch up the people who didn't see Trainspotting, or maybe they only saw Trainspotting once or twice, several years ago. And once things get going, they get going. It really doesn't slow down again. It just all happens, and there's Scottish accents flying everywhere, and everyone's angry, and there's blood, and there's yelling, and there's betrayal, and it's a nonstop ride after that. Basically, all the events from Trainspotting 2 sort of spin off of the drug deal that Mark stole all the money from, that happened at the end of the first Trainspotting. And here's a spoiler: everyone's still pretty fucking sore about Mark stealing the money, and they make no attempt to hide this when Mark comes back into town. Mark Brenton is probably living the most morally of all of them, and that's not to say that he's a good person. He's just the one person that doesn't steal, he makes an honest living, and he doesn't do drugs. He's sort of found other ways to channel his energy and his addiction. But Mark is still a selfish asshole, and he's still a bad person. And I think that's the most evident when you kind of think about the reasons he comes back to Edinburgh to try and square things up with Sick Boy and Spud. It's not really because he feels bad about these things that he's done. He has this health scare, and he scares himself into clearing his conscience, basically. It scares him, and he goes to give Sick Boy his cut of the money that he stole 20 years earlier. And I think he just generally goes to just check on Spud to make sure he's okay. And neither one of them are very happy about seeing him, because Mark is still a selfish asshole. And that's kind of, you know, for all of them, really. They're all still really bad people, with the exception of Spud. I'm going to say with the exception of Spud a lot, because even though the trailers and everything have Mark plastered all over them, I feel like this was really a movie that best served Spud. The most fascinating thing about Sick Boy, and I think the way that they show that Sick Boy is still kind of living in this lie, or in this in the past, is even though he's in his 40s, he's still dyeing his hair like that really bleach blonde, which worked in the first Trainspotting because he was young and rebellious and whatever. But at the age that Sick Boy is now, to see him walking around with that super almost white hair, it feels a little pathetic. And also at this point in Trainspotting 2, you see that Sick Boy is also sort of running these very small, well, maybe not small time, but running scams that would have been kind of a message if he were younger. You know, he's sticking it to the man. He's, you know, giving people what they deserve, especially since, you know, they'd be older. But since Sick Boy is, you know, older now, he's scamming people that kind of look like him, that sort of live like he lives now. And so it comes off looking very sad, and instead of like this message of, you know, you're gonna get what you deserve and I'm gonna give it to you, like I'm sure it looks in his head. Begbie in the first movie is an ill-tempered asshole. He is violent and he's dangerous. But in Trainspotting 2, Begbie is fucking terrifying. He's actually the villain almost of the movie. And I really only use the word villain to describe a antagonist if it is sort of over the top and ridiculous how the character is. And I kind of felt like Begbie was a little ridiculous. Like it serves him well, because in the first one he's over the top and ridiculous, so it's not like it doesn't fit in this world, but he's terrifying. Like I really don't know how else to describe him. He's the final level boss in a fighting game, you know. He's fucking Jin Kazama or something. He's completely crazy, and a lot of the movie is spent just running away from him, rightfully so. You know, it's noted that he's been in jail for 20 years, so whatever, you know, anger issues Begbie had outside of jail, he could kind of go, you know, stab somebody and kind of release it. But he's been just stirring and marinating in a jail cell for 20 years, thinking about the events that happened with Mark, and it's just filled him with internal rage. By the time he gets out, he's just a walking time bomb, and he explodes and just ignites everything he touches. He's fucking terrifying. So Spud is still the only likable person of the group, because while they're all really well developed characters, Spud has always been the only decent one of the group. And he's also the only one that kind of, it feels like he's actually making an effort to, you know, be some sort of contributing member of society. But Spud's a fucking goof and just a natural screw up. So when he does sort of get on track, he ends up marrying Gail, which I don't think is too much of a spoiler, who is actually his girlfriend in the first film, and they have a kid and things seem to be going well. And then in the most Spud way possible, he kind of messes it up and sort of sends himself back on this spiral into, you know, his addiction and into the things that he had successfully gotten away from. Spud really does seem to be the only one of them that has made an attempt to move forward and forget about the events of their youth, because maybe for the other ones of them, their youth was sort of the best times of their life. But, you know, Spud I don't think he remembers those the same way that the other guys do. You know, Spud went to jail for 6 months for stealing when Mark didn't. He seems to be the only one that really took Tommy's death really hard. And he's also the one that seems to be the most affected by that rift of Mark's betrayal. Like, you feel like he sort of lost the most because he considered them such an important part of his life. Spud really does consider those guys as friends, but I don't think the other guys truly feel like they're friends. I'll put it like this. I think Spud considers all of them his actual friends, you know, but all of them really only consider Spud their friend, if that makes any sense. I don't know if it does. So there are a few scenes in the movie that I found really interesting because I feel it shows how stuck all these guys are in their youth. And I think the film achieves this by having the guys end up in situations where either they are too old to be there or they're too old to be doing whatever they're doing. Like, there's a few moments in the film where Mark and Sick Boy are using what would be the equivalent of filters on Snapchat. Now, you know, you're never too old to use filters on Snapchat, but I think Snapchat is sort of the social media format that is associated with the younger generation, with, you know, the filters and the editing that you can do to your photos and your interactions on there, and it feels a little off because of their age and the generation they come from, and now they're kind of trying to grasp the reins of this generation, and it doesn't feel like they're open-minded. It just sort of proves how regressive they're still being. There's also a scene in the movie where Mark and Sick Boy are in this club, and though the club is playing a lot of songs from the 80s, they're the oldest people in the club. So, I mean, I don't know exactly what that would be called in the UK, that type of club where a bunch of young people basically show up to sing 80s songs, but I feel like it does have a name and it is a trend in the UK. I think it was intentional to very clearly showcase that Mark and Sick Boy are in this room full of all these very young people that are probably around the age they were, you know, in the first Trainspotting, and they're completely unbothered by it. Like, they don't feel out of place. They don't feel like they're sort of in territory that they're too old to be in. They're completely fine and comfortable. And overall, I think the biggest way they show how in the past they are is that there is a considerable amount of the movie that is spent reminiscing about the times when they were younger, but very little time spent actually catching up on the 20 years that they spent apart. And so no matter what they're doing, no matter what they're experiencing, there always seems to be this magnet draw back to the good old days, or, you know, that time we did that thing when we were younger and it was great and it was fun and we were unstoppable. There's just so much of an effort to just not live in the present. And though they illustrate it in very subtle ways, they're very effective ways, and you feel them just fighting against age and fighting against getting older and fighting against having to accept that they'll never be in a time of their life again where they were that youthful and they could get away with all these things. I love the ending of Trainspotting so much, and of course I'm not going to talk about the details of the ending, even though I don't really think I could spoil much since I've been kind of scarce with the details of the film. But the ending is not happy. It doesn't feel happy, and I don't think it should, because all of these guys, even poor Spud, they're kind of hopeless. They've lived so much of their life in the past that they just can't move forward. By the time you get to the end of the film and you've watched them conquer the demons that they've created unknowingly, by all the shit that they did in their past. You realize they've sort of dug themselves a hole so deep that they can no longer actually move forward, like even if they wanted to. And there's some hints that they do want to move forward and see life as it is currently being displayed instead of how it was displayed 20 years ago. They've just sort of fucked themselves over so much that there's no way they can do that. And they all kind of get stuck for different reasons, but they all suffer the same fate. And so the ending of Trainspotting, it feels really sad. They're beloved characters. You kind of all know they're horrible, but they are beloved characters. So I think there is a desire to see them be more than what they are. But, you know, at the end of the day, when you think about it, they're just hopeless. The movie is not disillusioned by what kind of people they are, and it doesn't try and give them an ending that they don't deserve or an ending that they didn't earn. It gives them exactly what they deserved, and it grows exactly what they planted. So yeah, that's my review on Trainspotting. I can't believe that we actually got a sequel to this movie. You know, the sequel to Trainspotting was sort of like a myth that went around Hollywood for a really long time. It was going to happen, and then it wasn't going to happen, and then there was a script for it, but then there wasn't a script for it. So the fact that this came together the way that it did, and they got back all the original actors, and they wrapped up everyone's storyline so completely, it's amazing that it worked. It didn't suck. It actually was the furthest thing from sucking. I think if you've never seen the movie, you can go into this and you can have a great time. But if you are a fan of the movie, you know it as well as I do. As long as you remember that this is not a rehash of Trainspotting, this is not an attempt to break ground or be like this wonderful innovation of cinema. It is a story that is designed to wrap up the lives of these characters. I think you'll have a great time. Yeah, we got a sequel that didn't suck. Hopefully it's the first of many in 2017, but I doubt it. I very seriously doubt it.